Today is 14th of September 2025. The day before yesterday, I talked about patience along with the discourse on Punnovada. Then after I talked about the Yoniso Manasikara, positive or wise thinking. After that, I talked about the manifestation proximate cause of effort, and then the third level of effort, that is culminating effort. Today, before continuing with the topic of effort, first I would like to talk about the third and the fourth armies of Māra. I have already talked about the two Māras, two armies of Māra. So I will discuss the third and the fourth armies of Māra. The third army of Māra is hunger. Although this challenge especially relevant to monks, but it also applies to meditators, particularly those in intensive retreat. In this context, I will address it from the perspective of such dedicated practitioners. Here, in an intensive retreat, meditators are required to observe 8 precepts. And according to these precepts, one cannot take food after noon. This practice may be unfamiliar or challenging for many meditators who are not used to it. As the day progresses, they may begin to experience hunger and physical discomfort. This experience of hunger can become a significant distraction, weakening both physical energy and mental clarity. For some, it may even trigger irritation, restlessness, or a strong desire to break the precepts. Māra uses such discomfort of a tool to shake one's determination and pull the mind away from the path. Therefore, recognizing hunger as the part of Māra's army is crucial. It allows meditators to face it not just as physical discomfort, but a mental challenge to be overcome with mindfulness, patience, and with wise reflection. Again, it's not just about the ordinary hunger for food. Here, hunger does not mean just about the ordinary hunger for food, but also about not receiving the kind of food one is fond of. In a retreat setting, the food is often quite different from what meditators are used to at home. The retreat center cannot provide meals that cater to the personal preferences of every individual. They do try their best to offer food that is generally suitable and nourishing, but still it may not match each meditator's taste or expectations. This too becomes a subtle form of suffering, craving for specific flavor, comfort foods, or familiar meals. When these desires are not fulfilled, dissatisfaction can arise. Some may feel disheartened, while others may lose motivation or become mentally distracted during practice. This is another way that Māra operates by exploiting our attachment to comfort, preference, and sensual pleasure, even in something as simple as food. Again, this hunger is not limited to food. It includes a wide range of sensual cravings, such as the desire for certain type of clothing, entertainment, comfort, and stimulation. One of the most prominent form of modern hunger is the craving for entertainment and distraction, particularly through devices like phone, music, and books. In daily life, many people are constantly engaged with their phones, checking messages, scrolling through social media, reading news, watching videos. These activities often serve as a way to fill moments of boredom or discomfort. In the silence of a retreat, when these usual outlets are no longer available, the mind can begin to feel restless or even agitated. This reveals just how dependent it has become and on constant input and stimulation. Similarly, music can be a source of emotional comfort or escape. It entertains, soothes, energizes, or numbs, depending on what one seeks. But in retreat environment where the goal is to cultivate inner silence and clarity, the absence of music can feel like a kind of emptiness. The mind may even start playing songs from memory, clinging to familiar rhythms just to avoid facing silence. Books, too, can become a subtle form of escape, even though reading may seem like a wholesome activity. It can easily turn into a distraction, feeding the intellect while pulling attention away from present moment awareness. In a meditation retreat where the primary focus is inward observation, engaging in reading, even spiritual reading, can become another way that another way the mind avoid the raw experience of what is what is arising here and now. All of these form of sensory deprivation, like no phone, no music, no books, create a space where Māra's third army becomes very active. Craving starts to stir, boredom, irritation, or restlessness arise. The mind begins to bargain. Oh, just a little music, or only one message, or maybe just a few pages of reading. These thoughts may seem harmless, but they are reflections of attachment. They are reflections of attachment, of a deeper hunger that's not been quenched. And out of this hunger, the mind begins to bargain. And if mindfulness is not present, one may start planning and even acting to fulfill these desires, allowing them to materialize into subtle or overt action. And this is the fourth army of Māra called Pariyesana Tanha. Pariyesana Tanha in Pali, Pariyesana means seeking or searching. And Tanha means craving or hunger. Together, they describe the mind's restless drive to pursue what it wants, whether it be food, comfort, distraction, or sensory pleasure. This seeking is not just about physical action. It is not just about physical action. It is the mental urge to reach out, to grasp, to chase after what is not present. For example, consider a meditator who is particularly fond of coffee, during the retreat. When coffee is not provided or not to be their usual taste, they may begin to feel subtle sense of dissatisfaction. This craving, if unnoticed, can lead them to start looking around, perhaps checking the kitchen area more often or scanning the premises in hope of finding something that meets their preference. The craving for a specific taste becomes a mental preoccupation, pulling attention away from the meditation object. This is the fourth one. The fourth pariyesana tanha, seeking out of hunger. The another example is the meditator who feels the urge to talk. Perhaps they are used to social interaction in daily life, and now in the silence of the retreat, they feel isolated or restless. Instead of facing that discomfort with mindfulness, they might start looking around for someone who appears less focused, maybe another meditator who is walking or sitting idly. They may see this as an opportunity to start a casual conversation, even if it goes against the retreat guidelines. The mind justifies it as harmless, but in truth is a reaction to the hunger for verbal engagement or emotional connection. Likewise, someone who loves reading may start looking for books, perhaps scanning shelves or common areas where Dhamma books are kept. Even if reading is allowed in limited form, the impulse might not stem from the desire for inspiration, but from subtle aversion to silence or boredom. The mind says just a little reading, but the intention behind it is to fill a gap, to avoid being alone with one's inner experience. This is one example. The another one. Let's take another one. Another Common example is the urge to check one's phone. Even if phones are surrender at the start of the retreat, a meditator might begin crafting reasons in their mind to asking for it. Maybe there's an urgent message, or I need to check something important. These justifications are often not based on real necessity, but arise from restlessness, curiosity, or a fear of missing out. Mara's influence here is subtle, encouraging the mind to trade silence for stimulation, presence for distraction. So, each of these behaviors seems small or harmless on the surface, but they represent how the hunger Māra uses can manifest through physical actions. They also show how craving often disguises itself as logic, urgency, or even self-care, but behind each urge is the same root, that is attachment. A mind not yet content with what is, still chasing after what it desires. Recognizing these patterns is not a cause for guilt, but a call for awareness. When meditators see how desire takes shape, first as a thought, then as a plan, and finally as an action, they gain the insight needed to cut it off at the root with patience, equanimity, and mindfulness. One can face this inner hunger directly, neither feeding it nor fearing it, but understanding it as part of the path. So to deal with this Thor and the fourth Māra, armies of the Māra, the Thor is the hunger, and the fourth is the Priyesana Tanha, seeking or searching out of the craving or out of hunger itself. Out of hunger, if you are easily content and you adopt an attitude of gratitude for whatever you receive, the Mara's third and the fourth armies will not trouble you very much if you are easily content. When you begin to taste the real flavor of the Dhamma, this is the another one. Remember, when you begin to taste the real flavor of the Dhamma, deeply peaceful, profoundly satisfying, and beyond any worldly pleasure. These form of craving lose their grip. At such a time, Mara's third army will seem like an army of toy soldiers, harmless, powerless, even laughable. So here mention two things to deal with: the third and the fourth armies of the Māra. That is Santuti in Pali, that is content, being content. And the second is the development of the the taste of a flavor, real flavor of the Dhamma. When the meditators begin to enjoy or to taste the flavor of the Dhamma, or let's say when yogis begins to develop rapture, piti, when yogis begin to develop joy, mental bliss, then they feel deeply peaceful, profoundly satisfying, which are beyond the worldly pleasure or beyond the reach of the ordinary people. So at that time, the craving lose their grip, means the hunger lose the grip. And when there is no hunger, when there is no the third army of Mara, then there is no chance to arise the fourth army of Mara. Because the fourth one is the conditioned on the third one. So again, this becomes especially true when meditators begin to experience strong rapture, PT, during practice. I haven't talked about the PT rapture. I will definitely talk later. When I talk about the second army of the Mara, dissatisfaction, at that time also I have mentioned to fight against the second army of the Mara, meditators need to develop rapture. And at that time also, I did say that I will talk when I will talk about the PT, and at that time I will again talk about the second army of the Mara. So again, I will repeat the same thing that I will talk in later about the PT, and at that time I will again talk about the second and the third and the fourth armies of the Mara, how the PT fights against the second, third, and the fourth armies of the Mara. So when their mind becomes deeply nourished. When meditators' mind become deeply nourished, not by food, entertainment, or sensual pleasure, but by the joy of stillness and insight, such meditators are called Piti Bakha. Piti Bakha in the text, meaning those who are nourished by rapture. Piti Bakha means the meditators, those who are nourished by rapture. For them, the hunger for worldly satisfaction fades because they have found a higher inner nourishment. At this level, the mind turns inward for its joy, no longer seeking satisfaction outside. Even physical hunger, discomfort, or the absence of entertainment loses its power of disturb. This is the strength that comes from effort, guided by wisdom, and the protection that comes from experiencing the Dhamma directly. So this is about the PT, how PT fight against the Thor and the both armies of the Māra. So this is about these points cover the Thor and the fourth armies of the Māra. I repeat, when I will talk about the PT, I will review these points to explain how PT rapture uh, can dispel or can be victorious against the second Thor and the fourth armies of the Māra. Now I will return to the topic of effort again. I have already talked the three levels of effort. These are launching or initial effort. Second, uplifting, boosting up or liberating effort. The third, culminating effort. This is categorized. These are categorized about its level according to its level. Now, the effort is categorized into four types based on its function. Now, based on its function, these are the first, the effort to prevent unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. I repeat, the effort to prevent unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. Second, the effort to dispel unwholesome states that have already arisen. Third, the effort to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen. Fourth, the effort to maintain, cultivate, strengthen, and bring to fulfill the wholesome states that have already arisen. So these are the 4 types of effort categorized based on its function. Of the 4 types of effort, let us begin with the effort to prevent unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. To apply this effort properly, we first need to understand what are the unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. At a general level, one might mistakenly think there are no such unwholesome states that haven't yet arisen. Throughout the beginningless past, all kinds of defilement have already arisen. Greed, hatred, delusion, then conceit, then doubt, restlessness, sloth, lack of moral fear, moral shame, and wrong view. In this way, there are 10 defilements. I repeat: greed, hatred, delusion, wrong view, then conceit, then wrong view, doubt, restlessness, sloth, lack of moral shame, and moral fear. There isn't a single defilement that hasn't appeared at some point in the endless cycle of samsara. This line of thinking may seem logical, but in reality, it is not accurate. So let's take a practical example. Suppose you are practicing sitting meditation. You are practicing sitting meditation, and suddenly a fellow meditator makes a noise, perhaps coughing, shifting, dropping something, or maybe cracking his knuckles. In that moment, anger arises. Anger arises in your mind, and you react. Why is this meditator making noise? Or what an annoying yogi. Now, this specific anger toward that particular person in that specific moment had not yet arisen before. I repeat, this specific anger toward that particular person in that specific moment had not yet arisen before. It is newly born. So in this case, the effort to prevent this unwholesome state, unwholesome reaction before it arises was not successful. That's why this unwholesome state arises. Let's take another example. Suppose you go to the dining hall for breakfast or lunch and you see the food. Perhaps it looks especially delicious, or it's a dish you are particularly fond of. In that moment, you failed, not seeing, or later testing. As a result, greed arises, a subtle or strong craving to have that food, to enjoy it, or to take more of it. Now, one might think greed has arisen many times before. What's new about this? But here too, it's important to understand the specific instance of greed toward that particular dish at that specific moment under those exact conditions had not yet arisen. This is a new occurrence. This is a new occurrence. An unwholesome state that was not yet arisen until that moment. So these are examples of the unwholesome states that haven't risen yet. So in this way, we can understand that whenever we are not mindful, or whenever we are not applying effort to observe the presently arising object, whenever we fail to apply the sufficient effort to get close to the meditative object or to develop mindfulness, when we fail to do so, means we fail to prevent the unwholesome states that haven't arisen yet. If you fail to observe rising as rising, if you lack mindfulness, or mindfulness is absent or weak, then unwholesome state tend to arise, and this unwholesome state has not arisen before. If you fail to observe the falling as falling at a time, unwholesome states tend to arise. So each and every moment when you fail to apply the effort in order to observe the presently arising object and to develop mindfulness, unwholesome states are tend to arise, and these unwholesome states are the new unwholesome states. So in the example that I have just given, if mindfulness had been present, if you had clearly noted, seeing when you laid eyes on the food, or at least wanting when the craving began to stir, it could have prevented. That is precisely the function of the first type of right effort to prevent the rising of unwholesome states before they take hold the mind. So we can see clearly, even though greed, hatred, and other defilements have arisen countless times in the past, new instances are always ready to arise under the right conditions. Preventing them requires the mindfulness, the effort, mindfulness, and wise attention in each new moment. Effort, mindfulness, or wise awareness is required in each new moment. That is what we are trying to do in each moment, observing the presently arising object by application of the effort. And by application of the effort, we try our best to prevent the unwholesome states that have never arisen before. So this is about the first effort. Yet to talk about the second, third, and the fourth effort. So we will continue in the coming days, and I will again describe in detail about those second, third, and the fourth effort. So for today, by recognizing the third and the fourth armies of the Māra, and by knowing how to fight against those the third and the fourth armies of the Māra, may you be able to be content. May you be able to develop mainly the antidote of those second, third, and the fourth armies of the Māra, that is piti. And many of you know that rapture develops when the mind becomes secluded from defilements. And again, mind becomes secluded when you develop mindfulness concentration, because mindfulness concentration frees the mind from defilements. Hence, the rapture develops. So may you all be able to apply the effort each and every moment to prevent the unwholesome states that haven't arisen yet. Meanwhile, may you be able to develop mindfulness concentration by application of ardent effort to give rise the rapture and to fight against the second, third, and the fourth armies of Māra. And again, may you be victorious.